Hello and welcome to another Morning Glory video, and today guys I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I would do a bolt action video. You see, over the various UK lockdowns I really got into bolt action, and although I've not been able to play a huge amount of games, I have recently, with things opening up, managed to get a game or two in, and it's been really fun. Now I do know that this channel is very much focused on 40k, very much focused on the Imperial Guard, but I also know that things have been a bit crazy with 40k recently. Every codex that comes out seems to be broken or have crazy internal balance, and yeah, things seem to be getting a bit wacky. And I know from personal experience that sometimes that can make 40k a little bit draining. So what I thought was I'll do a bolt action video, because there are other game systems out there and I very much have been enjoying bolt action, and yeah, I just think it's really good. So if you are getting a little bit burned out from 40k, you're getting a bit sick of every codex coming out being more powerful and guard struggling and all that kind of stuff, I highly recommend that you go and check out bolt action. Now I have done other videos on this game system before, general introductions and thoughts like that. That's not what we're going to be talking about today. I'm actually going to be doing a little bit more of a deeper video, not just talking generally about bolt action, but a little bit deeper on a couple of concepts that I have noticed with the game system that I think are quite interesting. So if you're a bolt action player, this video is certainly for you, and let me know what you think down in the comment section below. But without further ado, let's crack on with today's video. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing some casual analysis of a couple of observations that I've made from my last couple of games of bolt action. Now, the first observation I want to talk about is the starter armies. Now, Warlord Games, the guys that run the whole bolt action thing, they do a really good start collecting equivalent. So like you see with 40k, you start collecting, you get a unit or two, and that's it basically, 50 quid and you can start getting into the game. With bolt action, it's much better value for money, and for the same price as a 40k start collecting kit, you can get one of the bolt action starter bundles, which will give you an 1,000 point army. Now what's so important about this is that 1,000 points in bolt action is the game standard. It's a bit like 2k when playing, when playing 1 for 40,000. 1,000 points is basically all you could need if you didn't want to go any further than that, and you get that in a starter bundle. Now these starter bundles can vary a little bit with faction, but they tend to be between 50 and 60 pounds of bolt action, and Warlords is always doing sales, and you can get bolt action through third-party providers, so you'll tend to spend between sort of 50 and 60 pounds on your starting army, and in that bundle you will find that you get, not only do you get the models, you also get your rule book and you get your army book as well, which is like your codex. So it's a really fantastic deal, and I think they're a really good place to start. Now, a mistake that I have seen, or a misconception that I have seen, and I have made myself, is bolt action people go, or new people to bolt action people go, I'll just get the starter army and that'll be all I need. And the interesting thing is that the starter armies are really good, but they are not quite efficient enough. So you can buy a 1,000 point army. If you and your friend get into it at the same time, you both get one of these starter bundles and you both build them. And the starter bundles tend to be quite well balanced against each other, which is great. But I would say in terms of building a good bolt action list, they're only really about 70 or 80% efficient. And you're always going to get a couple of less than ideal choices, a couple of filler choices, which is absolutely fine, because what you'll tend to find with bolt action is that nothing is super broken or super overpowered or super weak. They all tend to be pretty well balanced unit to unit. But there are inevitably some choices which are better than others. So a lot of the starter bundles tend to come with quite a few weapon teams. And what I've found in my experience is that weapon teams, and when we talk about weapon teams, we're talking about medium machine gun emplacements, anti-tank guns, mortars, stuff like that. They're okay, and you don't want to be the guy that doesn't turn up with like a mortar. Mortars are pretty essential, but you'll tend to find that in the starter bundle, you'll probably only want 2 out of the 3 or 4 weapon teams that it gives you, for example. So what I found is that when one person turns up to a battle, and I've been the person that's turned up with a starter army, and I've been playing someone who's turned up with a starter army, and I've got a slightly more expanded one. And what tends to happen is, if both players turn up with starter armies, it's great. But if one person turns up with a starter army, and the other person turns up with a starter army plus a couple of more efficient choices, they've maybe bought an extra box of infantry or an extra vehicle, then that second player will be at a noticeable advantage. So I just wanted to say, whilst Bolt Action is extremely affordable to get into, you will, if you want to get the most out of your army, you will have to basically consider, okay, I need my starter army, but I'm going to have to sort of accept that if I want to win and I want to, I want to get the most out of it, then I'm probably going to need to spend, an additional £30 to £40, probably. So that's just something to be aware of. It's still miles cheaper than 40k it's at least half as cheap as 40k, 50% cheaper. I would argue with some of the prices increases and whatnot that GW have done recently, that it's getting close to being like 66% cheaper. I mean, if you get a starter army, an extra tank and an extra infantry box, you're probably looking at maybe £100, and that's more than enough for your 2k army. If you're going for one of the main factions, the ones that are doing plastic, not the more obscure factions that they do in metal. So it's still way cheaper. But when people say, oh, you can get into Bolt Action for like 50 quid, you get a full army, you can, but bear in mind, if someone else decides to tweak their army a little bit and get a couple of extra units, you'll probably need to do the same in order to still have a good fun game. Now, the other thing that I want to mention, my second sort of what I'd be really interested to know is, what do other people think of the start collecting bundles for Bolt Action? What do you guys think of the army bundles? Do you think that I'm right, or do you think that there are? Bear in mind, I've only really seen like the Japanese bundle and the Brit bundle and the British bundle again, the para bundle though, so regular British and the paras. So let me know what that's all I've seen. If you are a Bolt Action player that knows a bit more about the game, let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Are there certain starter bundles which you would say are better than other starter bundles? And what do you just generally think about putting, if you were to do like a starter bundle showdown, what do you think overall would come out as the best one? I'm interested. I'm looking at maybe picking up a second Bolt Action army. And I know that anyone that stumbles across this video is thinking of getting into Bolt Action would appreciate knowing, yeah, I want to win. I want to go for the most powerful starter bundle. So I think that would be really appreciated. So put that down in the comment section below. Now, the second thing that I wanted to talk about is something I've noticed, which is there aren't a lot of online resources for Bolt Action, but the few that you come across tend to perpetuate this idea that Bolt Action is an infantry game, and that turning up with tanks is a bit of a fool's errand. And it's very much, the tanks, because they can be one-shot relatively easily in comparison, by anti-tank weapons in comparison to, regular infantry, which, infantry can go down and it can get other benefits. That there seems to be a general prevailing thought that tanks aren't as good as infantry, and that really infantry is the way to go. I think what's interesting about this, and we're talking I've got a number of sources for this. I've got myself being the guy that didn't turn up with the tank. I've got myself who did turn up with the tank and the opponents didn't. And I've got my brother who got me into Bolt Action, who actually has been to a Bolt Action tournament. Okay. Now, so they're my sources for my thoughts around this. Now, what I think is really interesting is, if both players turn up to a game with this mindset and everyone brings, pure infantry, then it tends to be like, yeah, okay, that's fine, yeah, it's an infantry game, it's infantry v infantry, that's pretty good. And then if both players turn up with infantry and a bit of tanks, then again, that seems to be pretty balanced. But what I found is that if one person turns up with the notion that Bolt Action is all about the infantry, and one person turns up with a pretty, even if it's like just a mid-tier medium tank, if someone brings armour and someone else doesn't, even though the rules and everything says that, infantry should be better off and that the guy who brings tanks is silly, my experience has always been The guy that turns up with armour tends to do better. And we're not talking like really leaning into the armour. I'm talking like a sprinkling, you know, like an armoured car, a cheap armoured car and a cheap medium tank. I tend to find that that player has an easier time of it. And the other player who doesn't turn up with them, with the armour, tends to be fighting a bit of an uphill battle. Now, when I've been running my Japanese and I've turned up with just an armoured car, or an armoured car and a light tank like the Hargo, which is just an absolute travesty of a vehicle, but it's such a travesty that's a meme and I love it. But when I turn up with that, even just a couple of bits of light armour, and my opponent doesn't, then I tend to actually do really, really well. But the moment that my opponent turns up with a proper medium tank, which again, people say medium tanks and tanks in general aren't as good, but my opponent turns up with like a Panzer III, for example, I really, really struggle. And even if I'm running like an anti-tank gun and an anti-tank rifle and some other forms of anti-tank, like, you know, like a Piat, or as Japanese, if I'm running my suicide anti-tank people, I tend to find that it's just not the same. You can spend more on infantry-based anti-tank stuff than if you just brought your own medium tank, and it still won't be good. It won't be good enough to deal with someone that brings that medium vehicle. So I've done it to two British players where I've turned up with, you know, with vehicles and they haven't, and those games I, you know, won fairly handily. But then I've had it where I've only turned up with, you know, where I've turned up with medium armour but only like a couple of bits, and my opponent has turned up with, you know, like three or four armoured bits, and it's been like it's favoured them. So I do actually think armour is really, really important in bolt action. And the source that which I find really, really amusing is when my brother went to a bolt action tournament, because, you know, tournaments even in which are relatively rare bolt action, they're still like, that's where the real data comes from. My brother turned up to a tournament and he had a Puma armoured car and he had a Panzer III, and every single one of his opponents didn't bring basically any armour, like maybe transports, but that was it. And my brother just absolutely battered all his opponents, 3 rounds, 3-0, absolutely battered them. Because none of them, you know, they all had like Piats or bazookas, and it's like, that's just not enough to deal with a Panzer III, which is rocking like 3 medium machine guns. You know, 1 on the front, 1 coaxial, 1 pintle. So, yeah, you just literally my brother was like, I could just sit back and I could just blast them with loads of Hitler's buzzsaws and just have a great time. And I think that's what I found as well with my Japanese, with my medium tank, the Kai Shinto. What I found is that if the enemy has no armour, that thing is just a double MMG beast. And when I combine that with my Type 87 armoured car, I'm running 4 MMGs. I don't need an infantry MMG team then. I'm already running 4. And my infantry MMG team always seems to disappoint, because either it starts getting mortared straight away and it has to move so it doesn't shoot, or it just never seems to be able to do anything. So it's a bit of an interesting one. What do you guys think about that second point? Do you think that armour is actually more important in bolt action than people think? Do you think it's a bit of a myth that's kind of perpetuated by old forums and sort of a small player base, that armour is schmarmer? Or, you know, what's your experience? Have you ever, do you think, I think you can take too much. From my experience, and admittedly it's only limited, my experience is you want to take an armoured car and a decent, you know, sort of a light medium tank, so like the Japanese example, your medium tanks are like light tanks for everyone else. Or you just want to turn it with 1 medium, just at least 1 medium. I think that makes all the difference. I think it just provides that little bit of seasoning, a little bit of pizzazz that, you know, gives you an advantage over a player that doesn't turn up with a vehicle. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. I've got loads of little thoughts on bolt action. I'm happy to do, you know, one of these videos every month, for example, or whenever I feel like doing them. You know, I've got some thoughts around HE as well, and you know, light mortars and light HE. You know, are they worth it? That kind of thing. Let me know what you think of these bolt action videos down in the comment section below. And to all those 40k players who have sort of, you know, I'm not sure if I want to watch this video, it's not 40k, it's not guard. Honestly, guys, highly recommend, you know, if you're thinking of getting a new 40k army, or you sort of just, you want to scratch the modelling itch, but you're not really sure what to buy, you just sort of buy models for the sake of it, I highly recommend you check out your local bolt action scene, see if there's anything going on there. There's always 1 or 2 players hidden under a rock. And yeah, I'd highly recommend, you know, before you buy that next box of Primaris Intercessors or next Lehman Russ or whatever, you know, spend basically the same amount and try out a little bit of bolt action. See how you feel. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.